October 2002, Miami. 21-year-old Wendy Trapaga marries a man she met at beauty school. 4 days later, her body is found in a warehouse parking lot next to a dumpster. There's $1 million life insurance policy in her name. Her husband sobs in front of detectives, but his tears don't inspire trust. The husband's girlfriend knows the truth, but stays silent. Police suspect him, but can't prove it. 12 years will pass before one man's greed destroys the very lie he built. This is a story about how trust becomes a weapon, and an insurance policy becomes a death sentence. Wendy Marie Trapaga is born on April 29, 1981, in Miami, Florida. The family isn't wealthy, but they're solid: a father, mother Miriam Benitez, and older sister Rita. Wendy is 6 years old when her father passes away. The family doesn't publicly discuss the details of his death, but the loss leaves a mark that will define the girl's character for years to come. Miriam raises 2 daughters on her own. Rita, the eldest, takes on part of the burden. Wendy grows up in an environment where women handle things themselves, yet still look for someone to lean on. She learns early to trust people, not out of naivety, but out of habit. If the world took your father, you look for those who will stay. By 20, Wendy finds her passion. She loves fashion, follows trends, and decides to enroll in a beauty school in Miami. For her, it's not just a career, it's a way to build her own life. Friends and acquaintances describe her the same way: open, kind, always ready to help. She picks up stray animals, gets involved in other people's problems, believes there's something good in everyone. This belief makes her vulnerable, but Wendy doesn't suspect it. In 2001, inside the walls of that beauty school, Wendy meets a man nearly 10 years older than her. His name is Michel Escoto. He's confident, charming, and knows how to make an impression. Wendy doesn't see anything alarming about it. To her, he's simply an interesting older man paying attention to her. She doesn't know that this encounter will put an end to her life in less than 2 years. Michel Escoto doesn't look like a typical beauty school student. He's around 30 with a background in web design and teaching computer science. Why a man with a technical education would sign up for styling courses? That's a question none of those around him ever get a clear answer to. People who knew him would later describe him in one word: slick. Michel knows how to make an impression, senses people's weak spots, and knows exactly which words to say at the right moment. Charming, talkative, attentive to details, he creates an illusion of reliability. Wendy, who has just turned 20, falls under his influence almost instantly. The romance develops at an unusual pace. Within months of meeting, the couple is already living together. Miriam Benitez, Wendy's mother, watches what's happening with growing anxiety. The age gap, the speed of the relationship, a man whose past is largely unknown. All of it concerns her. But Wendy is in love, and there's no convincing her otherwise. She sees in Michel a man who will give her the stability she's been missing since childhood. What Wendy doesn't know changes the entire picture. Michel has another woman, Yolanda Cerrillo, an accountant, a mother, his longtime companion. Their relationship has been going on for years. When Michel moves in with Wendy, Yolanda doesn't disappear. Michel maintains ties with both, balancing between 2 lives. To Wendy, he's a faithful partner. To Yolanda, a man who will definitely come back. It would later emerge that Michel wasn't lying to Yolanda. He truly planned to return. But for that to happen, Wendy had to disappear. Yolanda doesn't learn about the wedding from Michel. She finds out he's moved in with another woman and causes a scene in a restaurant parking lot. She demands an explanation. Michel doesn't miss a beat. He takes her hands and says a phrase that 12 years later will echo in a courtroom. "I love you. I don't love her. It's a plan. I'll take out insurance on her and she'll die." Yolanda hears these words and doesn't leave. She doesn't call the police, doesn't warn Wendy, doesn't cut contact. She stays. Shortly before the wedding, a life insurance policy is taken out in Wendy Trapaga's name. The amount, $1 million. Wendy's mother, Miriam, is puzzled. The couple has no children. Their financial situation is shaky. And a 21-year-old girl suddenly decides to insure her life for an astronomical sum. There's no logical explanation. But Wendy doesn't ask questions. She trusts Michel. Meanwhile, Michel and Yolanda begin preparing. According to Cerrillo's testimony, they prepared a powerful substance together, which they planned to slip to Wendy unnoticed. They discussed how to stage an accident so the plan would look like a tragic coincidence. The insurance company pays out, Mikkel returns to Yolanda, and no one suspects a thing. Everything is thought through. Only one thing remains: the wedding. On October 10th, 2002, Wendy Trapaga and Michelle Escoto get married in Miami Beach. Wendy is 21. Shortly before the ceremony, she told her mother she was expecting a baby. Miriam took the news with mixed feelings. Too fast, too soon, too many unknowns. But Wendy is happy. For her, this day marks the beginning of a real family, one she hasn't had since she was 6. Michael plays the role of the loving groom. He smiles in photographs, holds Wendy's hand, says all the right things. None of the guests suspect that this man explained to another woman weeks ago why he needed this wedding. Later, at trial, Michelle would dispute the fact of Wendy's pregnancy. But in October 2002, that doesn't matter. The insurance is in place. The substance is ready. Yolanda is waiting for the call. Right after the wedding, the newlyweds head off on their honeymoon to Key West, a resort town at the southern tip of Florida. For Wendy, it's a long-awaited trip together. For Michelle, the first window of opportunity. He's carrying more than just suitcases. According to the prosecution, his belongings already contain the substance he and Yolanda prepared in advance. Wendy gets in the car beside her husband and watches the road to the ocean. She doesn't know this is her last trip. In Key West, Michelle makes his first attempt. According to Yolanda Cirillo's testimony, he slips the substance into Wendy's drink. She's supposed to lose consciousness, and then a staged accident. But something goes wrong. Wendy tries the drink and complains that it's too cloudy. She doesn't finish it. The plan Michelle and Yolanda worked on for weeks falls apart because of a single sip. Michelle doesn't panic. He acts as usual, continues playing the caring husband. Wendy doesn't connect the cloudy drink to anything dangerous. She chalks it up to chance and forgets about it. The honeymoon continues, and for Wendy, it remains a happy one. She takes photos with Michelle against the backdrop of the ocean, strolls along the waterfronts of Key West, makes plans for the future. A few days later, the couple returns to Miami. Michelle doesn't abandon his plan, he changes tactics. Instead of going home, he checks into the executive airport hotel with Wendy, a small motel near Miami Airport. The motel has a jacuzzi. For Michael, this isn't luxury, it's a tool. He's counting on a second chance. This time, the drink shouldn't seem suspicious. This time, Wendy shouldn't wake up. At the executive airport motel, Michelle drugs Wendy again. This time, he succeeds. Wendy begins to lose consciousness. Michelle carries her to the jacuzzi and tries to drown her, but Wendy fights back even in her semi-conscious state. Michelle can't finish what he started. The second attempt fails. Wendy is alive, but in an altered state of consciousness. She doesn't understand what just happened. Michael faces a choice: stop or cross a line beyond which there's no disguising it as an accident. He chooses the latter. According to the prosecution, Michelle puts his semi-conscious wife in the car and drives her through nighttime Miami to Yolanda Cirillo's house. This is the pivotal moment of the entire story. Up until this point, Michelle had been trying to construct a flawless scheme, a quiet death, a plausible cause, clean hands. Now the disguise is thrown off. The victim is still alive, the accomplice is waiting at home, and time is running out. Michael is no longer planning. He's operating in a mode of panic that only looks like determination. He pulls up to Yolanda's house with Wendy in the back seat. Yolanda sees them from her window. She gets in her own car and follows. 2 cars move through nighttime Miami heading north. Behind the wheel of the first, Michelle, in the back seat, his semi-conscious wife. Behind the wheel of the second, Yolanda Cirillo, a woman who could have stopped all of this weeks ago, but chose not to. They're heading to an industrial area between the Palmetto Expressway and Miami Springs. There are no residential buildings here, only warehouses, parking lots, and dumpsters. At night, this place is deserted. Michael stops in the parking lot of one of the warehouses. He steps out of the car. What happens next is known from the testimony of Yolanda, who remains in her car nearby. Michael takes a tire iron. He kills his wife. Wendy Trapaga, 21 years old, married 4 days, dies in a dark parking lot next to dumpsters. Michelle returns to Yolanda's car. In his hands is the tire iron, wrapped in a rag. His clothes are stained. According to Cirillo's testimony, he says one word: done. No explanations, no emotions, no pause. Just a statement of fact. Yolanda doesn't ask questions. She starts the engine. Now they need to get rid of the evidence. Yolanda drives Michelle to Biscayne Bay near the Port Miami area. It's night. Michelle walks to the shore and hurls the tire iron into the water. The weapon sinks to the bottom of the bay. Meanwhile, Yolanda throws Michelle's stained clothes into a dumpster. They don't exchange unnecessary words. Each does their part as if it's been rehearsed, though in reality, the plan didn't go as intended. On the morning of October 14th, 2002, a worker at one of the warehouses in North Miami-Dade notices a body in the parking lot. Next to a dumpster, it's Wendy Marie Trapaga. She's 21 years old. She's been married 4 days. There's a $1 million insurance policy in her name. Police arrive on scene. Detectives note signs of violent death. They begin standard procedure, interviewing relatives, friends, neighbors. Michel Escoto, Wendy's husband, comes to the police station and displays grief. But detectives immediately note that his behavior seems unnatural. The $1 million insurance policy draws the investigation's attention on the very first day. A young couple with no children and no money, and suddenly an insurance policy for an astronomical amount. It's a classic motive, and the police know it, but suspicion alone isn't enough. Michel Escoto tells detectives his version of what happened that night. According to him, he and Wendy argued at the motel about her pregnancy. Wendy dropped him off at their apartment in South Beach and drove away. He never saw her again. The story is simple and unverifiable. No witnesses, no cameras, no direct evidence that he's lying. Police suspect Michelle, but can't prove it. The insurance policy is a motive, but not proof. Michel's behavior is a red flag, but not evidence. Detectives check his alibi, interview motel staff, look for surveillance footage. The results don't provide enough grounds for an arrest. Yolanda Cerrillo, the key witness to everything that happened that night, lies to police during the initial interviews. She conceals her role, her knowledge, her presence. She would later explain she was afraid Michelle would destroy her if she talked. Without her testimony, the investigation has no chain of evidence. The case goes cold. A year passes, then another, then a third. Wendy Trapaga's body is buried in one of Miami's cemeteries. Her mother Miriam lives with the knowledge that the person who took her daughter's life walks free. Every Mother's Day, every one of Wendy's birthdays becomes an ordeal. The tire iron lies at the bottom of Biscayne Bay. The evidence has long been destroyed. Michel Escoto continues living in Miami, waiting for the right moment to collect what this was all about. $1 million. That very greed will become his fatal mistake. In 2005, 3 years after Wendy's death, Michel Escoto files a civil lawsuit. He demands the insurance company pay him $1 million under the policy taken out on his late wife's life. To do this, he has to give testimony under oath in civil court. And here, Michel makes a mistake that cannot be undone. In his testimony, he presents a version of events from the night of October 14th that differs from what he told police in 2002. The details don't match. The timeline shifts. Descriptions of the place, time, and circumstances contradict each other. The detectives who waited 3 years for a lead receive one from the hands of the suspect himself. The contradictions between the two versions prove serious enough to move the case off dead center. Police reopen an active investigation. Now the prosecution has not just a motive, but a documented lie from the suspect. Additionally, investigators manage to get Yolanda Cerrillo to talk. She finally agrees to cooperate. Michel Escoto is arrested in 2005. He will never walk free again. The $1 million he planned, rehearsed, and acted for will never be paid out. The irony of this case is that Michel's greed set in motion the very mechanism of his punishment. The same greed that drove him to commit the crime put him in handcuffs. If he hadn't filed that lawsuit, police still wouldn't have had any leads. Between Michel Escoto's arrest in 2005 and the start of the trial, nearly 9 years pass. For the American justice system, this is an unusually long time frame, but the case was complicated by numerous factors: gathering additional evidence, expert analyses, numerous pre-trial hearings, legal maneuvers by the defense, several changes of attorneys. Each stage took months. Michel remains incarcerated throughout, awaiting trial. For Wendy's mother, These years stretch into eternity. The trial begins in March 2014 in the Miami-Dade County Court. Michael makes a decision that rarely ends well for a defendant. He will represent himself. He has no legal education, no courtroom experience, no understanding of procedure. The judge appoints a standby attorney, Terrence Lenneman, who is meant to step in if the defendant can't manage. Michael pleads not guilty and declares his innocence. His position: someone else committed this crime, and he became the victim of false accusations. This is the defense he will maintain until the very end. The prosecution is represented by the experienced Gail Levine. Her strategy rests on two pillars: the insurance policy as motive, and Yolanda Cirillo's testimony as direct evidence. By this point, Cirillo has struck a deal with the prosecution: full immunity from criminal charges in exchange for detailed testimony about everything she knew and saw. For Wendy's family, this compromise is bitter. The woman who helped plan their daughter's death won't spend a single day behind bars. But without her testimony, the case falls apart. Yolanda Cirillo takes the witness stand and begins to speak. What she tells the jury is the complete chronology of the conspiracy, from the first conversation to the last dumpster. She describes how Michael explained the plan to her in a restaurant parking lot, how they prepared the substance together, how they discussed scenarios for staging an accident, how Michael showed up at her door with a semi-conscious Wendy in his car. Cirillo recounts how she followed Michelle to the warehouse district, how she waited in the car while he did what he did, how he came back with the tire iron and said, "Done," how she drove him to Biscayne Bay, where he threw the weapon into the water, how she herself disposed of his clothes. The prosecution asks the key question: why did she stay silent for so many years? Cirillo answers, "He would either destroy me or I'd end up behind bars. I had no choice." She later adds, "A mother lost her daughter, and I had a part in it." Her testimony is corroborated by physical evidence. Police divers recovered the tire iron from the bottom of Biscayne Bay, in the exact spot Cirillo indicated. The weapon had been submerged for over 10 years, but they found it. Michael Escoto stands before the jury and personally cross-examines his former girlfriend. The man who, according to the prosecution, planned the crime with her, is now asking her questions in a courtroom. He tries to prove that Yolanda is lying out of revenge, a jealous woman who was abandoned for a younger rival. But Cirillo doesn't change her testimony. She answers calmly and consistently, giving the defense no openings. Michael cross-examines other witnesses as well. A man with no legal training attempts to conduct cross-examinations in a courtroom, where his fate hangs in the balance. His strategy is chaotic. He formulates questions poorly, gets confused by procedural rules, violates examination protocols, and the prosecution constantly raises objections. The defense brings in DNA expert Candy Zuliger, who challenges the evidence found on Wendy's dress. The expert claims the analysis results are ambiguous, and that DNA from someone other than Michael was found on the dress. Prosecutor Levine counterattacks. She points out that Zuliger received $27,000 from the defense for her services and questions her objectivity. The turning point comes when Michelle calls the Trapaga family's attorney, Jorge Boron, to the stand. Boron states bluntly, "You married her 3 days earlier and took her life for the insurance. It's obvious." Michelle loses his composure. He points at the court bailiffs and makes a threat. All these people in white won't be enough. The judge immediately finds him in contempt of court and adds 30 days to his sentence. This episode shows the jury a man who cannot control himself when backed into a corner. On April 22, 2014, both sides conclude their arguments. Prosecutor Gail Levine addresses the jury with her closing statement. She calls the case a crime of greed and says, "He took her life boldly, brazenly, for money." By this point, Michelle has handed his closing statement to standby attorney Terrence Lenneman, the only time during the entire trial that a professional lawyer speaks on his behalf. The jury retires to deliberate. 12 people who listen to weeks of testimony, examine the evidence, watch the defendant threaten a witness, and lose control. They need 2.5 hours. By the standards of complex premeditated murder cases, that's fast. The verdict: guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. 12 years after the death of Wendy Trapaga. 12 years during which her mother visited her daughter's grave, not knowing whether the guilty party would ever be punished. On May 7, 2014, Judge Marisa Tinkler Mendez hands down the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before the sentence is announced, Miriam Benitez, Wendy's mother, takes the floor. She addresses Michelle directly. Michelle Escoto, you destroyed my life. Many of you have daughters and sons, and they will embrace you on Mother's Day. But I'll have to place flowers on my daughter's grave. She didn't deserve this. Prosecutor Levine sums it up in one phrase. Wendy's life was short, but the road to justice was long. Michelle Escoto is serving his sentence at Charlotte Correctional Institution in Punta Gorda, Florida. Yolanda Cerrillo, who received immunity for her testimony, continues to live in Miami. She hasn't spent a single day behind bars. The price justice paid for the chance to convict the principal offender. The $1 million was never paid out to anyone. The insurance company, which fought off Michael's claim for 3 years, received judicial confirmation that a beneficiary has no right to a payout if they are implicated in the death of the insured person. Wendy Marie Trapaga lived 21 years. Of those, 4 days she was married. Her story became a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing about a person isn't aggression, it's calculation.